Welcome to the April 2026 edition of the FO Exclusive. Every month, senior partner Glenn Carle, FOI senior partner Glenn Carle, who is a geopolitical analyst of some repute and retired CIA officer, and FOI is a geopolitical risk advisory, and I, the founder, CEO, and editor-in-chief of Fair Observer, and a partner at FOI. Every month, we analyze the key issues of the month. We sift signal from noise, and this is something we do to make sure that you understand the world better, you make sense of the world better. Today, we are speaking on, I look at my watch, around 12 noon Eastern Time, a little after 12 noon Eastern Time, Wednesday, 29 April. Last month, we focused on two issues, the dangerous implications of the new US-Israel-Iran war and big trouble in US private credit market. This month, we will shine the light only on one key issue, and that issue is US-Israel-Iran war will change the global economy and the world order. Before we dive into this issue, let us recap the key events of an eventful month. Artemis 2 flew by the moon and returned safely to Earth. Glenn follows space far more closely than me.
Yes,
he will.
I'm going to jump out of my chair on this one, and because this might be the one happy news item, arguably, that we will talk about. As everyone knows, it's the first time in 54 years that humans have left the orbit of the Earth and flown around the moon and back. This is part of a project called the Artemis project by NASA in the United States to return humans to the moon permanently. What will happen is that within the year, there will be another test of the Artemis rocket, which is very high performing but extremely high cost and is doomed to an early death because of its cost, which I could go into. It will be succeeded by a ship called Starship and the Blue Origin and so on, but no matter. There will be another launch this year to test landing capabilities by docking in orbit of the Earth. And then in 2028 is the target date. Humans from the United States will set foot on Mars. China is projecting its landing on Mars for 2030, and they may well reach it first, the moon first, if there are any obstacles. Now, this is all happy news because it is expanding the range of human capabilities. Space programs always have substantial spin-off technology effects that affect the quality of life and economies worldwide. And it's the beginning of a whole new chapter in space exploration, but actually human capabilities. So that's the good news.
All right. Well, let's get bad news underway. Israel has passed a law that in effect makes it mandatory for Palestinians to receive a death sentence if they are convicted by a military court of deadly terrorist acts. Now, why is this important? It's important because those convicted have no right to appeal. And also remember, it's a military court. It's not a civilian court. Civil rights groups and human rights groups in Israel argue that this law is racist. They say that the language in the law implies that it could be applied to Israeli Arabs, but not to Israeli Jews. The parliament has also passed a $271 billion budget. This is Israel's biggest ever defense budget. And so there are concerns that Israel is becoming more and more of a Spartan state, wherein the Palestinians and Israeli Arabs are very much second-class citizens. More on this another time. We've already said that concerns within Israel, and Israel is a robust democracy, about this bill are high, and this bill does not do Israel's international reputation any, or this law does not do Israel's international reputation any good. Speaking of international reputation, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has suspended the renewal of its defense cooperation agreement with Israel in light of the current situation. She means the current conflict. Note that Giorgia Meloni is a right-wing, some would argue even a far-right prime minister. She has been a supporter of Israel. She has been an ally of Donald Trump, US President Donald Trump. And yet she's staying neutral in the war. She has not allowed US planes to use bases in Sicily, and she's argued for peace. So that is a major shift. And she's shifted because Italian popular opinion is against the war. Now, we move on from Italy to Spain, and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has come out very strongly against the Iran war. And not only that, he has doubled down on a left-leaning immigration agenda. He launched a scheme to offer permanent residency in Spain to 500,000 illegal migrants. The migrants must have lived in Spain for only 5 months, and they must have no criminal record. Now, supporters of this policy say, well, Spain has a declining demography. This will help Spain become a more robust economy. And opponents of the bill say that this will lead to a demographic disaster. Gradually, the Spaniards will become minority in their own country. Nevertheless, Pedro Sanchez, on the whole, is flying high. And that cannot be said for British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, who is increasingly in a hot soup. Why? He appointed...
Atul, before you get to Great Britain's current travails, the Sanchez immigration issue really is it's a major one for Spain, but it does raise an issue that merits deeper discussion at some future time, perhaps. Europe in general, most advanced democracies, countries with high standards of living in general, are suffering from the same problem, which is a demographic dearth, declining populations either already occurring or soon to occur in absolute numbers, declining population. So they're confronted with a choice, a dilemma. Unless we have more workers, the economy cannot continue to grow. As our population ages, we need people to work, to care for the aged, and to keep the economy going, and to generate tax revenues.
Have a tax base.
Agents,
exactly.
Pensions. And the only solution to that is immigration. So there's a dilemma that all advanced economies are facing, and it is a significant one.
And at the same time, immigration is not a painless phenomenon. It raises issues of assimilation. It also raises the specter of clash of cultures, if not necessarily a civilization. So it has its own problems, as we know, by the phenomenon of the rise of far-right parties, as well as increasing rhetoric against immigration in many European nations. And let's get to Britain. The UK, the United Kingdom. British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is in increasingly hot soup, as I said. He appointed Lord Peter Mandelson as ambassador to America. This has come back to haunt him. The Dark Lord, or the Prince of Darkness, as Mandelson was fondly called by the British press, was a key architect of New Labour, along with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Sadly, he had too many dodgy friends. Some included folks in China and Russia, and one of them was an American, and he was a certain Jeffrey Epstein. The Starmer government has sacked Sir Oliver Robbins for this disaster. Apparently, the Foreign Office, in Starmer's version, did not tell him that Mandelson had failed security clearances. Now, Robbins is telling another story. He told a parliamentary committee that there was a very very strong expectation from the Prime Minister's office to rush the process of security clearance for Mandelson's appointment. So what we have now is a full-blown political crisis. The Labour Party is losing popularity. Labour MPs are restive, and talk of defenestrating Starmer is now rife in London. Also, there's a lot of talk in the UK about Britain being in peril. In fact, Lord George Robertson has said so. And he has said so because he blames the Starmer government's corrosive complacency for ignoring his recommendations or the review he did of Britain's defence forces. And Lord George Robertson is a former NATO Secretary General. So the UK is facing many crises, from rising inflation to high debt to bond yields going up. And in addition to all of these things, Britain's chief rabbi, Ephraim Mirves, has warned that a sustained campaign of violence against Jews was gathering momentum. Apparently 9 people were arrested for.
Now, the chief rabbi is not imagining things at all, and not that anyone should imagine that he would, but his comments should resonate and be taken seriously, paid attention to by people everywhere. This is not just a Great Britain issue where anti-Semitism in Great Britain is rising, although it is, but the documentation showing dramatic increases, sustained increases over years of anti-Semitism in most countries, and in the United States notably, is shocking.
Yeah.
Not just comments, acts of violence.
Yeah. In fact, anti-Semitism is experiencing a dramatic record high surge globally, particularly following the October 7, 2023 attacks. Data shows a nearly 350% increase in US incidents alone over the past 5 years. Apparently, 9,300 incidents were reported in 2024. In Britain, the reason the chief rabbi was complaining is because 9 people were arrested for planning an attack on an unknown Jewish target, and this was one of many recent incidents. American Jewish Committee's The State of Anti-Semitism in America 2025 report chronicles rising physical attacks and online vitriol against Jews. In the 2 years, quote, in the 2 years since October 7, an overwhelming number of American Jews feel less safe. Over to you, Glenn.
Yeah, the important point, I mean, that's an important point, but the explanation generally will be taken to associate the rise of anti-Semitism with the actions of the Israeli government, which many may criticize, and the conflation of anti-Israeli political positions with anti-Semitism. That is a real phenomenon, and as Israel has become the dominant imperious power in the region, one can understand that there would be a shift, a loss of sympathy for Israel and towards the downtrodden. However, there's a deeper issue concomitant with that is occurring worldwide, and that's something we've all seen, which is the rise of the far right, or if you don't want to characterize it that way, of the nativist, nationalist, right cultural and political parties in advanced democracies, in part because of the demographic issues that we talked about a moment ago, largely because of economic stresses from globalization, and because of dramatically large percentages, historically so, in advanced economies of immigration. So there's a nativist reaction, so that the people look to the other as something that is to be is viewed as hostile and dangerous. And the Jews have always been part of the other.
But here's the important thing, is our sources in the UK, in France, in Germany, and the Netherlands speak about very high anti-Semitism amongst immigrant Muslim communities. In fact, that is a major problem for them because these Muslim communities identify with the Palestinian cause. They believe their fellow Muslims are being oppressed. They believe that they live in an apartheid state. And therefore, they often, in radical mosques, come to believe that attacks on Jews happen to be justified. So it is not just the far right, Glenn. It is many Labour voters. It is many voters of all the left-leaning parties in Europe who are quite anti-Semitic.
That's a very important point. And you put your finger on something else too, though. One should be aware that many of the Muslim immigrants come from societies where, in fact, perhaps all of them, that's not true, but many, where it is during, say, Ramadan, illegal for a non-Muslim to eat in public, and where one may not enter any religious establishment if one is not a Muslim. And this is just the way society is organized and the laws are. And so that's transposed in sort of a reverse framing by immigrants coming to non-Muslim societies, and that creates tensions.
Yeah. I mean, one data point there, the French intelligence have been, and indeed British intelligence, MI5, have been particularly concerned about preachers in certain mosques who have been, shall we say, brewing a toxic brew. And so this is, to repeat, not just a far-right phenomenon. It's not just a few people on the far right. This is a phenomenon that is sweeping society at large. And here, immigration has proved to be no solution. Immigration hasn't led to people becoming more tolerant and necessarily more benign. So identity politics.
It's not just the French intelligence service. Who has detected this in France. I mean, this has been a problem for decades. The Saudi government spent many billions of dollars over 50 years, especially since 1979, when the Mecca was seized by jihadists. And part of the deal was between the Saudi government and the clerics that the Saudi government agreed to finance proselytization of the Wahhabi sect of Islam, which is extremely conservative. And so many of the textbooks and the trained clerics disseminate or propagate, whatever term one wishes to use, a version of Islam that is grossly anti-Semitic and intolerant of any difference at all. And that's just a fact. And that has affected the framework of perception and belief of many Muslims worldwide. Now, the Saudis have, Glenn, under pressure after 9/11, backed away some from financing all of that, but this remains a generational issue.
Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong. Your former organization, the CIA, analyzed Wahhabi influence all the way from Bosnia to Indonesia. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that, am I correct in my assumption?
A central part of our work, and there was an explicit agreement between the royal family in Saudi Arabia. The clerics would support the legitimacy of the Saudi royal family in exchange for the Saudi government then financing madrasas, schools worldwide, and the training of clerics worldwide with the Wahhabist version of Islam, which is quite hostile to any deviation from their own interpretation of the Quran and the refusal to accept anything that is not from that. And that's part of the reason for 30 years there's been the issue of jihadism.
All right. So we move on from anti-Semitism to another country closely linked to Britain, and that is India. In India, Narendra Modi is in similar trouble to Keir Starmer. He was playing football in an embarrassingly amateurish way in Sikkim recently to try and gain votes in West Bengal, because West Bengal seems to have a love for the beautiful game, unlike most of India. But all of that cannot detract from a politically embarrassing defeat. For the first time, a government bill was voted out by Parliament. Now, this is important to register, because India has a parliamentary democracy. Governments command a majority in the lower house of the parliament. A prime minister is in office only if he or she commands the confidence of the Lok Sabha, the lower house of the parliament. And generally, governments don't table bills if they think they won't get through, even if they are coalition governments. There are consultations, discussions, etc. The last time the government, a sitting government, lost a bill in the Lok Sabha was 2002. So only twice this century, and I hope I'm right. If I'm wrong, we will do further research. This is something that I looked up in a hurry, but apparently the last time a sitting government lost and failed to get a government bill through was 2002. Now, why is this defeat very important? Because the government was tabling amendments that would have increased the seats in the lower house of parliament from 543 to 850. This would have decreased the political power of the south. And the regional and linguistic divisions in India are back in play. Now, let's move on to Canada. Canada, Mark Carney seems to be doing well. Mark Carney's Liberal Party has secured a small majority in the House of Commons after winning 3 special constituency elections. Under Carney and his predecessor, Justin Trudeau, the Liberals have run a minority government so far. They managed to rule Canada with coalition partners. Now they have a majority in Parliament. The Carney government has also created a Canada Strong Fund, the first for the country. This fund will invest in energy, infrastructure, mining, agriculture, and technology. The fund will have an initial corpus of 25 billion Canadian dollars, that is $18.4 billion as of today. It's a broader strategy by Carney to boost Canada's economy in face of US tariff threats. This fund, this investment fund, will invest in combination with the private sector. The focus will be nation-building projects such as port upgrades and natural resource development. Obviously, the opposition has criticized the move. They make the argument, or opposition politicians make the argument, that unlike Norway, Canada is in debt, meaning its sovereign wealth fund will not be paid for by revenues but by borrowed money. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has called it a sovereign debt fund. Maybe so, but there's something innovative about this fund. The Carney government will allow Canadians to pay directly into the new fund, and this practice doesn't exist in other countries with similar funds. So Canada is doing something right. You like Mark Carney. He played ice hockey for Harvard, just like you. So, and he's an Oxford man on top.
Kind of wisdom.
Let's move on to Takaichi Sanae, the Japanese prime minister. In a major move, she said Japan would relax restrictions on weapons exports to open up the defense industry's trade with foreign countries. She said, quote, "No single country can now protect its own peace and security alone." Note that Sanae sparked a row with China by suggesting that Japan would respond if Taiwan was invaded. Obviously, Beijing has said it would resist Japan's new form of militarism. Those of you interested in China-Japan tensions can read my long article. We've covered it. Glenn and I have covered this for a while, and I wrote a piece which Glenn reviewed. Moving on from Japan,
if I may, Atul,
Yeah.
I know we're anxious to get onto our Israel-Iran-U.S. dance. However, what does Mark Carney's sovereign wealth fund for Canada and Sanae Takaichi's policy of now allowing and fostering Japanese arms sales outside of Japan have in common? Well, they have quite a lot in common, actually. Both of them are signs of this radically, dramatically, rapidly changing world we're living in, and the recession, the withdrawal or decline of American influence, frankly. The sovereign fund is a transparent effort, and I'm not passing judgment on it, to insulate Canada a little bit from Wall Street and from Washington, and to try, as a country 1/10 the size of the United States can, to diversify and to insulate itself from American capriciousness. So that's one. And the Japanese move is yet another sign that Japan has now really become, finally after World War II, a fully mature independent state. And it's by necessity, because there too can Japan count on the United States security umbrella, and for certain. And one should always count on oneself first under any circumstance. And the Japanese now think the answer is probably no, they can't. And so this is a step towards sovereignty and to trying to fill the gaps that the United States is creating.
And now we'll briefly discuss a political earthquake in Europe. Something major happened in the centrist TISA party, which is a new party, mind you, won 2/3 of the seats in Hungary's election, ousting long-standing Prime Minister Victor Orban and his populist right Fidesz party. Orban had been in power for 16 years. He had run an increasingly authoritarian and corrupt regime. Peter Magyar was actually a member of Orban's party who campaigned against corruption, who campaigned for the rule of law. Apparently he drove in his beat-up car through villages all around the country. Not only did he start a new party, but he won it. And the interesting thing about this election is it's not any of the establishment parties that won it, or the old establishment parties, not of the left, not of the right, but a new centrist party that wins the election. And it wins particularly on governance and competence issues. And a lot of people talked about apathy in European politics. But one thing we have to give Peter Magyar, for one thing, we have to give Peter Magyar his due. He was able to energize Hungary, mobilize voters, and get them not just out to vote, but also to celebrate. And now, of course, comes the hard part. He has promised to improve governance, promised, of course, to improve rule of law, clamp down on corruption. He's talked about improving relations with the EU. The EU will release a bunch of money. This is not good news, of course, for Russia, because Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin were rather close. And in fact, a leaked telephone call of Viktor Orban's foreign minister speaking very obsequiously to Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, harmed Viktor Orban greatly. J.D. Vance showed up to campaign for Viktor Orban. That didn't help much either. And now we have Peter Magyar, who is determined to improve relations with the EU, who has taken away the veto that Hungary had over EU money going to Ukraine, and now we have a completely new political landscape in Hungary and in Europe.
Fundamentally, what this is that the Hungarian people's will has finally triumphed. The Hungarians have been a majority hostile to Orban for years and years, but he has fiddled with the election results and suppressed the media and jailed and destroyed any opponent. at all, and this is a victory for the Hungarian people and a loss for Moscow. The government of Orban
Glenn,
was largely a pawn of Moscow.
To be fair, Glenn, Orban was no Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He hasn't jailed as many people. And I think, yes, he's controlled the press. Yes, he has been corrupt. But the fact that Peter Magyar could run a grassroots campaign, and the fact that he won a 2/3 majority, and the fact that Orban conceded quickly shows that Hungary,
to everybody's surprise,
is a democracy. Well,
it remains by the skin of its teeth. It did succeed. That is true. Most of the organs of democracy were being, if not frayed, had been suppressed or broken. So I don't have there are no kind words that one can say to mitigate the consequences of and the subservience of Orban to Moscow.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.